Welcome to Best Practice, a show where we interview leaders in the building industry to unpack the tools, strategies, and tactics they use to run great organizations. Today, we're very excited to be joined by Dan Wood of WorkAC for a fireside chat about how to basically run a firm that's both small and global. Dan Wood is a co-founder of WorkAC and principal of the firm with extensive experience leading large-scale and complex U.S. and international projects. Wood was a 2017 Gary Chair at the University of Toronto Daniel School of Architecture, as well as a 2013-14 Louis Kahn Chair at the Yale School of Architecture. He is currently an adjunct associate professor at Columbia's GSAP and has taught at the Princeton University School of Architecture, Penn Design, and UC Berkeley School of Environmental Design, where he was the Friedman Distinguished Chair. Wood is a licensed architect in the states of New York, Colorado, and Rhode Island. His publications include 49 Cities and Above the Pavement, The Farm, co-authored with Amal Andraus. And we'll also be talking about another book. We'll get there when we cross that bridge that was released in 2017. With that, thank you very much, Dan, for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
I think it would be great to start a little bit with the early lessons that you had in your career. And maybe in particular, you spent some time at OMA.
70 human years.
Yeah, 70 years. You and Amal both spent some time at OMA. And I'd love to understand how working there helped inform your approach to starting a WorkAC. Maybe you can also dive into the things that you learned that you kept and the things that you let go from your time there.
Yeah, there is another book I'm working on called Everything I Didn't Learn About Architecture, I Learned at OMA. About running a firm, I should say.
Yeah.
It was not the best place to learn how to run a big global practice, but it was a great place to learn how to be creative and work on amazing projects and meet amazing people and to never stop focusing on design. Business, that was something else. But I think they've straightened it out now, just not when I was there.
What about maybe you can talk a little bit about the projects that you worked on while you were there, and what were some of the kind of interesting things that you took away from that?
It was cool. I started working there in 1994. There were less than 20 people in the firm. And it was a particularly bad time for architecture, the early 90s. And it was fun. By the time I left, there was more than 100 people and we had projects all over. So it was great to be there through that 10-year period from 94 to 2003. And, just to have a chance, what we were really focused on in those 10 years was taking what had been a very academic or let's say theoretical approach to buildings. I think if you think of the competitions for the big library in Paris or the Jussieu library or, some of these projects that were, had they been built, who knows what they actually would have looked like. But, to take the approach that had been developed in the previous 10 to 20 years and apply it to real projects around the world and really figure out how to, accommodate building code and handicapped access and, all that stuff while maintaining the strongest possible theoretical position and design focus. So that was really great. And that's what we were really working on. And it was great to be able to hire a lot of people who are still there, who have become partners there to build up that expertise in the firm. So it's not true that I didn't learn anything.
Yeah. How about the design process? There's been a lot written about the design process during those times about this kind of, I remember reading this one article, something about brute force or thinking about the design process, very brute force method by which this extensive use of the model as, hey, we're going to produce as many models and many ideas as possible within a given time frame. But it's not even the model. It's every model also is accompanied by a booklet that explains the concept and everything else. How is that running that way? Because that's not very, that's not a common way of practicing.
Maybe it was more common back then. I don't know. But it was basically about testing infinite options so that REM could edit and shape the ideas. I think REM was notoriously open to ideas from anyone. He would ask the cleaning people, what they thought of something. And it didn't really matter who you were. A good idea was always appreciated. And he gave a lot of responsibility to very young people. I was in the model shop first. I was a model maker only. And I was 27 years old. And then, he called me out of the model shop and he was like, I think that you should be in charge of all the US projects. So, so I was like, okay, because you're from the US. So that was my trajectory from basically model shop to partner within a few days. And so the process, that there was a lot of foam, a lot of testing, the booklet really came out of the way that we communicated with REM, which was by fax. And, you had to every night coalesce all the thinking from that day, collect all the images and get it into a visual form that was easy to read, that, would be like a 10-page or less fax to REM that he could then comment and mark up and send back. From the very beginning of the process, it's always about presenting it in a way, but also coalescing the ideas, like really concentrating on the most important things, because REM had limited attention span because he was doing so much other stuff. So it had to be very clear. I think that was maybe part of the brute force too. The fax was amazing. It was a great way to work.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating because a lot of times organizationally, firms have different approaches to this, right? Like some firms, it's like the founder of the firm draws a sketch on a napkin and
napkins
go and resolve. That's the project and that's the inspiration. Versus this, it seems like it's a more somewhat democratic approach to it. Like it's really empowering people to be more autonomous, like just bring the best ideas and maybe more meritocratic in that sense.
Also,
yeah.
Everybody had to bring their A game. People were really working at the highest levels. It was amazing. And REM has an amazing eye and a great sense of what's important. And, he needed to see things in order to respond. In the end, it was all his project, but, it was a selection process and a winnowing down and a narrowing down of options.
So would this extend even to the idea of I guess even for a new project would come in and everyone has the same information to start with and everyone is just throwing their ideas out.
Yeah, I would always start with the discussion, like a roundtable discussion with REM, throwing out ideas. That's how projects kicked off and kind of continued. Yeah.
It sounds like a writer's room, if anything, right?
Yeah, it was very much. Yeah, that's interesting. He was a writer. So maybe.
Yeah.
Comedian, though. But yeah, I'm sure that's not how it is now. I like the fax. I'm sure that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they make models anymore. Or if REM's even evolved. I don't know.
How from those times, what would you say are some of the things that you preserved at WorkAC?
Yeah. So we preserved that. We preserved a lot. Actually, like it was a school. I didn't learn that much in school. It was really a school. And we've preserved models. We still make models. We don't really do the foam extravaganza as much as we used to in the beginning, but we really stand by the physical model because we are in the physical building making business. And we find that, as much as people think it's not, the computer is a two-dimensional tool and you can only see one two-dimensional representation of anything at one time, even though you think it's 3D. But really, it's very hard to have a conversation about something that's on a screen versus in comparison to a conversation around a three-dimensional model. I think we're getting a little bit more used to it, and designing more using 3D software. Even with clients, there's still something really important about seeing it in physical space. So we maintain that. I think we maintained our, global outlook and global, and just we like to hire people who are from different places. We like to work in different places. We like to travel to different places, and I think a lot of that comes from that experience. It was just a great kind of melting pot of people and ideas, and then you're really in touch with how people are thinking in all different parts of the world. So we maintain that. I think, we maintain this focus on design for sure at the expense of many other things. We like ideas.
Do you have a similar relationship as editor in the same way that REM had with the studio, or is that kind of...
Maybe we're a little bit more on the sketching side, but no, we still start with discussion. We still collaborate with everyone in the office. We really do rely on people to come up with ideas in a similar way. Maybe not. We're in the office a lot more than REM was. So, it's a lot more in hand stuff. But yeah, we don't draft. We sketch, but we don't really do that much drafting.
You mentioned
That much. I don't know. I don't even know how to draft.
I think that's the interesting thing from being when you are like in a sort of leadership position. It's like it's a creative direction. You're trying to just you're trying to communicate the high level mission statement of the company in a sense, or like the focus of the company. And so then employees can absorb that and emulate or, embody that in the work that they're trying to do. So like knowing how to draft that level is not as necessary, I think, as it is being like the repetitive about, hey, this is what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. This is why it's important. This is what's important. This is what we should focus on. High leverage.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And I think also because we're always changing what we're interested in, slowly over the course of the 20 years of the firm, it's definitely evolved. We have a lot more back catalog. We have a lot more built work now. I think that has helped a lot, having projects to point to and drawing sets that people can look at. Has really helped, although not as much as you would think. But yeah, I think it's important. And in a way, there are people here who've been with us for quite some time, and they're really good, and they know a lot of the previous work. But with the new people, yeah, it's a lot of pointing them in the right direction.
Maybe talking a little bit about this, you mentioned a little bit earlier about staying global. In your book, we'll get there when we cross that bridge, which is really, it's an awesome book, and like how open you are throughout the whole process of work, the whole catalog of WorkAC's work, or at least what's shown in the book, is really great. And what I love was this kind of the shot of a piece of paper, very simple, just showing like I think it was like WorkAC rules or something like that. And there's 5 rules, right? And number 1 is act bigger. 2 is stay global. 3 is the inside is different than the outside. 4 is plants are important and animals too. And then 5 is when in doubt, paint in blue, which I love that one.
Still going blue.
Yeah. And what I'm curious about is like, why did you feel it was important to even outline these 5 principles for the firm?
Yeah, from the beginning, we didn't know. That's the other thing about working at OMA for 10 years is you don't know what your own capacities are. You don't even know what your own interests are, because in a way we had meshed so much, like you were saying, the culture in the office was imprinted on us like a tattoo, and so we didn't really know what we were interested in. We knew generally. So in a way, but we knew we didn't want to be OMA. We didn't want to be REM. We didn't want to, yell at people all the time. We've slowly tried to decide what we were about. And those were early rules in that kind of process. The first 5 years, it was really like we were just going to do the work. We weren't going to be academics. We were just going to work our way through it and take one project at a time. And those rules related to that, we knew we were going to be doing bathroom renovations and dog houses and, carpet changing projects and that kind of thing. So we knew that, for example, we should act bigger. We should not go around and saying we're the bathroom experts. We should be like, we're doing the bathroom of the future, or the bathroom that's going to set the world on fire, or the bathroom city, because I think, we did a lot of analysis of how firms start, and you can see architects get stuck in small and unable to make that leap to big. I think architects who are okay at big, it's much easier for them to do small things. So for us, it was important, and maybe that's not the case anymore, but I do think there's something, if we had only been doing small projects for 20 years, I think we would be in a different kind of office. So it was important to, maintain, even though we weren't like flying around the world on business class and private planes to like design cities anymore, like literally from one day to the next, we still, wanted to get there.
Those two, for the one, act bigger, and the stay global, I think are very fascinating because I love this idea that even the smallest scale project can speak to something larger than itself. And that's a very optimistic, like super optimistic, which is, I think, core to, I think being an architect is being able to extract something like high potential out of something small. But the other one about staying global, I feel like those two together set you up to work a certain way aspirationally. And the one about staying global is like really fascinating because I think I mentioned,
Global
yeah,
is a bad word now.
no, I don't think so. That's my perspective. But I think the idea of aspiring to be part of maybe a more global culture in a sense, because I think, coming off of OMA, you were embedded in the global culture from working at OMA. And so the aspiration to maintain that presumes like, how do you get there? It's a sort of question, like anyone starting off is like, when you say stay global, I'm like, how do you even do that? Is it just is your work talking about global issues, or is that you're plugged into a global culture through a network that you're cultivating? Like you're trying to intentionally meet people, find people, stay connected to a much larger conversation, which means you have to intentionally take steps to get there. Like you can't just sit, waiting for the phone to ring sort of thing. And so I'm curious about, what did it mean for you, for both of you? Was it that approach of, hey, we got to stay plugged in to this broader network, or was it more about the global concepts?
Yeah, I think first it was a recognition that there's two of us. One of us was not American, is not American. She is American now, but at the time she wasn't American. Amal grew up she was born in Lebanon, grew up in Saudi Arabia, in Paris, in Montreal. I think that's an important fact. And then I am American, but I had spent 10 years working in Europe. So I think that it was really like not to fall into the trap of like just being in New York office, but not even in New York. Like I think there's an extremely valid way to practice, which is very important now, which is the super local, the big fish in the small pond, basically. Yeah. And it's a really important and a great way to practice, and I think has produced some amazing architecture. So it's not like this is the rule for everybody. I think it's maybe just the rule for us. Those rules were for us, but we couldn't do that. There was first of all, we moved to the big ass pond, of New York. So there was no way to be the enormous fish, but also we just, we didn't have the kind of ties here that someone would in a place, and we made a conscious decision to move here and not somewhere else. So in a way, the global becomes our little pond, not very successful. And so a little bit of it is the network, that just travel, and the network that we created and cultivated. I think we had a great 5 or 6 year relationship with the Danish university, who would send us interns every year. We always had Danish kids coming to New York for 6 months at a time. And that expanded. We still have people from France and Italy and Asia, come here. So it's a network that we're tapping into, but it's also a network that we're creating. And, and it's just, for us, we became architects, or we're interested in the chameleonic aspect of architecture, and that, the opposite of the local office, someone who was born in that place and who knows that place. We're very interested in all of our projects, even in New York, like taking on looking at a client's issues through another set of eyes and bringing a kind of different perspective to it in order to see new things that they may not have seen themselves. And, that's what's really important to us, even working globally, is that we're not parachuting in like the modernists did, but really taking on local issues in a very important way, but also understanding that we're not from that place, and that is an advantage in certain places, but knowing also that it's a bit of a disadvantage at the same time. So, but I think we like learning, and I think by staying global, you're always learning about different places and different. We had a period where we were working in Iceland. That was awesome. In Panama, we never built anything in those places, but we learned a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's what's fascinating to me is like even just like the actionable steps to get there, which is okay, you're establishing a network, but what does that mean? Is like, it was academia part of that intention of, one, to say both, you get to stay tuned in to a certain culture, or, a much more global culture, just because of the fact that a lot of the universities that you worked at also bring in an international, just plugged into that conversation. And, is it, because I think for a lot of people, it's a very fascinating question. If you look at historically, that is the playbook in a sense, all the way to like Gropius, right? Through the Harvard, the GSD and all this stuff. It's like you stay plugged into these academic institutions that open up relationships across the world. And it's almost that those institutions were critical, if maybe less for core, but it was like super critical to be able to work globally.
Yeah.
through the institution. So I'm curious if that's like a little bit part of also the way which you were able to make that happen in a sense.
I think a little, maybe not exactly in the way you describe it, but because, we mostly taught it at US institutions, but the students are definitely international. It's a little bit. I think that it's not, I feel like a lot of our kind of staying global has been self-generated more than institutionally supported because, I've never been a big travel studio person. I don't know why. Like I was teaching at MIT a few years ago and I was like, okay, I got my studio and I end up, everyone's presenting their studios as someone's going to Brazil, someone's going to Japan, someone's going to, and I was like, I didn't know we could travel out. I was like, we're going to Queens. So,
which is kind of
I didn't know we could travel. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's why I feel like the teaching is more domestic, but certainly teaching has done a lot for us as an office. I just don't know if it was really helped us stay global. It's a great way to think about things that clients don't let you think about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is that kind of act bigger because like being able to think about these other scales of projects that are global in nature just keeps you plugged in, but it's not necessarily a way to feed into the practice.
But the best thing about teaching is teaching, honestly. It's like imparting knowledge to the next generation. I really like that. And I think that, so talking about like design process, I feel, I use my design process for the students as something that they can try, knowing that the next professor, they'll have a different, way to look at projects and problems. But, I just feel like, here's one way to look at something. Eventually you'll find your own way. For me, really teaching is about teaching.
Yeah.
I really like teaching.
Well, on that note, I think in the book, you also talk about this idea of the diagram, which I think is maybe ties into education in a different way, more internal to the practice. But in the book, particularly, you call it out as like one of the first ways in which you're starting out, you're doing these kind of bath renovations and these other small scale projects. The diagram ends up being the most productive way for you to bring in larger issues into even a small space. And it was almost like you're drawing at the scale of a city potentially, but at the scale, just using the diagram. And what I find interesting about diagrams in general, and also this idea, if we look at a diagram as an asset that a firm produces, it's an encapsulated knowledge that could be repurposed or inform future projects. And, it can pay dividends in that way. How has that been part of the firm? Is the diagram still important? Is the model now superseded the diagram as like the kind of asset, or are they one and the same? And how have you repurposed that if it doesn't succeed? Or you also mentioned that, your interests change over time as well, what you are fascinated by. So maybe you can kind of walk us a little bit through that about like the potential of these diagrams for the.
Yeah, I think when we were starting in 2003, there was that period where diagram was everything. And I think that it became very prescriptive. You used to see it a lot with students, and I think it was a different understanding of the diagram than what we had learned and what we did in our firm. I do think diagramming is very important to clarify. I feel like some of my core beliefs about architecture are the stupidest possible things, but I still think, I love that a floor is someone else's ceiling, like that for me is like the deepest possible thing. And it's something that I find like I tell it to students all the time, it's every room is not a building. A building is a collection of rooms that are tied together by this kind of incredible network of structure. And it's, so I think the diagram, like the section, is still very important to us because the section is like this magic diagram for how spaces relate to each other and that your floor is someone's ceiling. And so I think it's, for us, diagramming or working in plan and section, those are fairly similar. And we still believe, there's an important aspect not to try to tackle. It's another reason why the 3D model is so crazy because you're trying to do everything all at once. There's a reason why, authors outline their books before they don't just sit down on page one and like figure out where they're going at the end. It's like you outline it, you organize it into chapters, you craft the paragraph, you craft the sentence. So it's, there's a diagram to everything. It's not this kind of magic thing. It's really about thinking. It's about thinking and efficiency. I think once you realize as a student that every room is not a building, which is like something that students need to learn over and over again, you understand there's a kind of efficiency to architecture, and that efficiency can create amazing possibilities. And I think the diagram is a way to illustrate those possibilities, to clarify intent, and to set core principles for a project, which is also very important. Set the core principles at the beginning of the project, and you're going to be great all the way through, because then everything kind of relate back, from value engineering to, how you address the rest of the program, things like that. If we can all agree, like, this is an important aspect of this, this thing that ties everything together. Let's put all our money there. Let's put our effort there. And that will be the thing that transforms our organization, our institution, our life, or whatever. Yeah. So I still believe in diagrams, but we couldn't really call them diagrams at a certain point, because everyone was talking about diagrams because the other thing about the diagram is it's the product of a process of discussion, of thinking, of editing, and of design. It's not the thing. It's, you can't just start with a diagram and end up with a building. And that's what we learned at OMA. Like, those diagrams were produced during the process, early in the process, but, you had to figure out what you wanted to diagram before you diagrammed it. And I think it became this kind of like recipe, this plus this equals this. And it's a little bit of a more shallow understanding of the possibilities of a diagram. And I think now, we're very interested in systems and sustainability and, some kind of cultural touchstones that are difficult to integrate within that kind of diagrammatic approach. And I think so, as we mature as a firm and the projects get more complex, our thinking about how to, that notion of efficiency is still there, but it's like an efficiency on many different levels, not just a kind of spatial efficiency. So I think it's maybe less, but in terms of like how a building is organized, it's still very important to establish this kind of core relationships, which I think you could call a diagram.
Yeah, I think that how you're talking about this section really resonates with your work, because maybe there's something, sometimes it feels to me that one of the most, outside from like materials, and maybe it's almost like program is like the highest leveraged area to focus on. And almost like the most of the innovation for spaces can come from program and mixing program together and trying to introduce unexpected program, which leads to maybe a compelling story that clients could want to really envision seeing, when you can really tell a story about what's going to happen there. And I feel a lot of your work does focus on the section and trying to be innovative about program. And, even the project for Miami, which is near and dear to me because I'm from Miami, and so that project was super dope, where like you play on the facade as like the actual, the space, where all the fun stuff is happening is actually in the thickened wall, or the thickened exterior.
4 feet that they gave us.
Yeah. And so I could see it seems like a lot of the DNA of the firm is really focused in on seeming like the section as like that kind of tool where most of the fun happens. And then it's how do we continue to preserve the spirit of this throughout the rest of the project?
Yeah, no, I think one of the saddest aspects of Revit and, working that way, although I think that's a great innovation in many ways, is that the section becomes something that's generated at some point, by the project, rather than, something that can be a design tool that's used. It's not like I always tell the students, you can't cut a section. You can design a section and then manipulate your building to match what your idea of the section is. But if you're just cutting a section, like, it's too late in a way, and oftentimes there's not a straight line that shows the right, there are sectional relationships that are very important to building organization that aren't necessarily found by cutting a straight line through a building, but that still have this, I don't know.
Yeah.
maybe complicated.
Do you find yourself like revisiting some of those diagrams or some of the
Sure.
early work in
We revisit ideas for projects for sure. Yeah, and try to reuse them. I think because we did a lot of competitions and theoretical projects early. We did this big project called Nature City for MoMA, which has like 100 ideas that we are still trying to use.
There are like 100 different buildings in that project. Right?
Yeah. There's so many ideas there, and it's great. And it's still an endless source. You know, we took this idea of this waterfall building and tried to build it in Gabon for this other project. And we actually mocked up the waterfall, which was amazing, but that never got built. So now it's two projects removed from possibility, but we may do it again.
That's awesome.
Yeah, actually, we tried to get a waterfall in our project in Maria, which is built, but they cut the waterfall. So,
but that one's overlooking the water, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. They're like, we already have water. So maybe transition a bit more inwards to the office too, a little bit. Like in the book, one of the things that I love about it is like it's very transparent. It's like very communicative. You talk about not just the projects, but also what you're going through as an office as well during that time. And even the project in Gabon, I think you talk a little bit about that project as well. But I'm very curious about, the firm has seen itself like scale up. So I think there's a moment in the book where you describe it being about 40 something people, and it has gone through swings. What practical lessons have you learned from those experiences as an office that you keep in mind now when you're thinking about whether resourcing or staffing or like even the projects that you take on?
We learned way too late that you actually can insure your fees with the federal government for foreign projects.
Oh, wow.
Through the Exim Bank.
That's amazing.
Yeah, if you have a large government project, like with a foreign government, there's a whole process for insuring your fee, which we did not do, and therefore lost like $1 million. But so that was one very practical lesson. I think, those moments of stress are very painful, even to relive, when you lose a big project or when you realize that you've way overhired and I think, we're very thankful to live with at-will employment in the US, which we didn't have in the Netherlands. But at the same time, it's heartbreaking, to go through these ups and downs. And, you hear about it from other architects throughout time, but it's tough. So I think, you learn two things. One is it happens and it's not your fault, and it has happened to many people. And this, in a way, that's the business, and it happens to other kinds of businesses, and not to beat yourself up too much about it. I think we also learn, like what we were just talking about, you can always have another project and another idea. It's okay. It's not going to be so we don't really, we don't always invest every idea we have into every project because there's always going to be another project. Yeah. So to be flexible, but I guess I was going to say, like, those painful times, they're also fun in retrospect. It's like Amal and I are really together and like really, thinking about the firm, which we don't, sometimes it runs on autopilot, and it's fun to think about the firm as a project. And, I think every so often we have to remind ourselves, not just through painful moments, but, just moments, like we're always trying to be a better office and a better environment. And I think slowly we're getting there. Slowly we're unlearning all our OMA business acumen.
Yeah, we could probably spend another conversation just talking about like what you're referring to in the. I'm super fascinated about like the apocryphal stories, or just like how does a firm sort of, the way that it's retold is like OMA is like was flying by the seat of its pants, or was building the plane while it's like flying, like gliding essentially, but but almost at a feverish pace where it's even hard to fathom how many projects one has to go after in order to sustain that machine at that point.
Yeah. The Concorde crashed. That saved the office.
Not being able to travel as fast. Yeah.
It was like spend the money.
Yeah.
At one point, he used to sometimes need a Concorde ticket and a first class flexible ticket in case he missed the Concorde.
Oh my God. Amazing. How is looking back now, how is the firm structured today? Is it the same? Has that changed in any way?
Yeah, no, I think we have more senior people. At the beginning, it was really just me and Amal and a bunch of kids. And I think the kids have grown up slightly. We have people with more experience in the office, more experience in general and more experience in the office. And those two things are super important. And that has allowed us to delegate, people are involved in the contracts and, understanding, I told you before we started live that, we only started tracking time like 7 or 8 years ago. But I think that gives a kind of broader knowledge. People have the tools now to understand like how the firm is functioning. Whereas before it was like, just the two of us. So in a way it's more collaborative on a wider scale. We were always collaborative on the design side, but now, I think we try to involve people in discussions of where we're taking the firm. So it's organized in a sense. Amal and I are still involved in every project and essentially still taking all the risk, but we have a series of more senior people who run projects. And, I think we're slowly pushing to have them run more than one project, which is a big adjustment for us.
Yeah. What would you consider to be the biggest challenges you're focused on in the moment? And as you're thinking about that question, just to let everyone know, feel free to start adding any questions you have in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll start transitioning over to pick up some of those questions shortly. So yeah, what are the biggest challenges you're facing right now?
Luckily, we're facing the challenge of growing again, which is great. And it's fairly new. I think in January we were in the panic mode, and now during the pandemic, we actually built a lot. We finished a lot of projects, maybe 10 projects, including some are still under construction. But, we have our biggest project is under construction in San Francisco, 350,000 square feet. And we just built a lot. And so we finally have the portfolio to get the projects that we're going after at a much higher rate than previously. Projects are coming in. So we're really thinking through, how do we organize ourselves again, to grow. And so that's the last few weeks have been all about that. And a little bit, how to protect ourselves because everyone says a recession is coming. It's like typical,
Yeah.
This is the moment when we grow, and this is the moment when we're about to shrink. So
yeah. And I know that conversation is really in the air right now. What indications have you seen, or are you starting to see that in any way, or are you just hearing it anecdotally from others? Yeah.
No. So I just heard about it anecdotally. I just heard that some very big firms have laid a bunch of people off.
Yeah. It's interesting that whole piece of like where we're at, it feels both speculative, like very speculative and not tied to reality at the same time that it is tied to reality. It's like really confusing.
Architects are not the only people dealing with this, that's for sure.
Yeah. So as we start to get questions, I'm very curious about maybe talking about, we've learned also about the change over time. How have clients changed for you, or what have you noticed in terms of client expectations? How has that changed? Have you noticed anything from your time at OMA till now on what clients are expecting?
I don't know. We have a different kind of client now than we had 20 years ago. That's for sure. I think, so our clients are more institutional now. So for us, that changed quite a bit. I don't know if there's been a change in general. I do think institutional clients even just expect so much more, they seem to, before a project even starts. We're just constantly putting together teams and getting fees. We never used to have to give a fee for an RFP. It's like, why get a fee from 10 different people? That architects are going to, just do it for whatever you're going to pay them. But it's just so much work to put together these teams, and then you get the project, and that client says, we don't really care about the team. We actually want you to work with these people, and this is going to be your fee. So I don't know. I feel there is a little bit more work on the RFP side I've seen. I think once clients, we love our clients. We try to only work with people that we want to work with, and they've remained great. So we got some questions.
Yeah. First one here is, how long did it take you to get your first project when you started working?
So we had no work. I tried to get some work. I tried to coach some work from OMA or like collaborate with Ram on something. There was no go in that. So we actually had no work when we started. But what I always tell people is that, it's as soon as you say you have a firm, people love the startup architecture firms. And I think, and it's such a great time because you have no overhead, like zero overhead. You have no institutional baggage. You can do really small projects and still make money on them. It's a great moment. And I think also those kind of clients who go after young architects probably don't have a lot of money, but they always have ambition. And that's why they're, at least this was our experience, those early clients, like they would just do anything and they were great to work with and really came up with great ideas. And we had no money and it was just, we were all in it together. Big ambition, low budget was our kind of name of the game. So let's see, but it took just a few days. So people knew we were invited to submit our qualifications for the new museum, the one that Sana built.
Oh, wow.
Like before we even started the firm, because someone heard we were leaving OMA, so that was our first RFP and we did not get it because we were had nothing to show, but it just means it was cool that we were out there. And our first project was a doghouse.
Yeah, that was great that your book started on that project. That was awesome.
Yeah. But that was like mid 2003, I would say. So mid 2003, we got that project, we got some other small projects, but we got our project for Diane von Furstenberg's headquarters building in 2004, early 2004. So it was less than a year before we got our first significant project. And that remained our biggest project for years, 12 years, probably our biggest build project. And yeah, we got that, because she was looking for something interesting and different. It was a great working relationship.
And this was a time when probably you didn't even there wasn't like a website, or maybe there was a website, but it wasn't like a lot
of. And we didn't, I don't know if I could know the whole story, but anyway, she called us on a Friday. We went over, we met her. She remembered that she had met us earlier. So she was excited about that. She's okay, here's what I'm doing. Let's meet again on Monday. Give me some ideas. So over the weekend, we built 3 models out of literally 50% hot glue, 50% foam core. They looked like ass. And, we brought them over to her and she said, oh, let's meet upstairs. And we go upstairs and realize she's been running an architectural competition. Todd Williams, sending in beautiful wood models for months. And we were coming into the tail end with 3 crappy models that we built over the weekend. We were working out of our apartment at that point. And so we built them on our kitchen counter. But she liked the ideas, she liked one of the ideas. It was she was into ideas, which was great. Not materials, not, she was really into ideas. So we were
It's amazing.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Let's see. As a student, it's interesting to hear your philosophy on architecture, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about a room is not a building line.
As a student?
Yeah.
Take my studio, Mr. Student, Ms. or Ms. Student. No, I just find that when you give a program to students, often they will make each program its own little box. And often one of the first things they do is put all the boxes together so that in a way, the building looks like a collection of boxes, each box being a room. And I think, I think without the experience of thinking through buildings, which is what students have, it's hard to deal with complex programs, And I think one of the things that we really learned at OMA, one of the great things about working with foam, for example, is that it's a subtractive process. So you're acting an interior and instead of adding things together. And I think it's that kind of impulse to add things together that leads to this room as a building, every room kind of project. So
yeah, it seems like your work has maintained, to some degree, some of the projects maintain this idea of subtraction a lot. Like the punch out is or the cutout is a big kind of move as part of your work. So I could see the through line there about being subtractive and adds a lot of potential to spaces because you can also be playful.
Yeah.
Let's say even with a bigger than we are mindset, it's tricky to scale up project size. Do you have any tips on the transition from the smaller scale SFH projects to larger scale single family home projects to larger scale commercial cultural projects?
So for us, it was really we would do competitions or we would do theoretical projects that were bigger, or we would do urban planning. What's crazy is that in Europe, at least in the early 2000s, the way to start your little firm as a young architect was to do urban planning, and that's what was available for younger firms, which is, just a totally different idea about what younger firms can do than we have here. And so we saw that kind of thing. It's because I think that there is a problem in scaling up. It's just not easy to do. It's not easy to scale up. So what we were thinking is that you just keep practicing the big stuff, even though no one's asking you to do it, that kind of thing. Or have a big idea that you actually scale down to the scale of a bathroom rather than getting really good at bathrooms and trying to do like a giant bathroom. So yeah, that's what it is. Or at least that's how we approached it.
Let's see. One question here is, what have you done to retain talent at WorkAC? So like from the talent perspective and keeping those senior folks on staff, like what's been part of the thesis for culture in the firm and things like that?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to retain people. I think because we hire ambitious young people who are very good, and then we train them very well. And then they tell us that they want to leave and start their own firm. And who are we to say you shouldn't start your own firm? It's amazing. And we have alumni from WorkAC who have started, who are lighting designers or, industrial designers and ceramics people. Some people just leave architecture, and we've had so many people work for us. So what we do to retain is just try to maintain a creative office, try to pay them as much as we can. Good benefits. We've been really cognizant of the trajectory in young people away from working 90-hour weeks. And I think we were never that into it. That's never been our kind of mode. But we're really conscious that people have lives and, it's not all about work, even though work is more fun than fun, as we say. So, yeah, I think, we just try to create a place and we try to have fun. That's the main thing. I can't work if it's not fun. So hopefully it's fun.
We have a question from Marjan Pearson. If you were going to teach a professional practice course for architects, what are the 3 things you would want to emphasize?
I saw this question coming in, but you blew my tagline. I was going to say, 1, I should say that I'm not the best person to teach professional practice. 2, they should reach out to Marjan Pearson, who would be great. Sorry, what was the real question? 3
things you would want to emphasize.
Professional practice. Who's going to ask me to do a professional practice class? These days, I would say, I think, the one thing about professional practice class is like you learn a lot of really good stuff that by the time you need it, you have forgotten it, But honestly, Bob Hillier was a real mentor to us early in our, like when we started the firm, we met with Bob and he was just amazing. He used to teach professional practice at Princeton and I used to speak at his professional practice class once a year. He was just amazing because he was really into professional practice, I think. And he taught things that, nobody teaches you really, His big advice to us was like, hire someone to do all the work and then you guys go get the new projects.
Yeah.
Which we didn't listen to. But I do think, I think the things that we've really learned is to set up, it's really stupid, but maybe it's good because we're in Monograph, to not just rely on QuickBooks, but to go ahead and invest in something that ties your time together with your money and see that relationship. As difficult as it is for architects, and we still have people who are like, why do we count everything over 40 hours as overtime if we're not getting paid overtime? It's a good question, but it's still very important to understand how things are. I think, it's even at the smallest scale, I think really understanding the relationship between time and money is really important. And it's too bad that there's not more software out there that does that at an affordable rate.
Yeah, I think we're pretty affordable for what we do. But no, but I think that's an important one. I think it's just the fact that no matter how interested you are in design, there is a business component to what you're doing. And if the business side is not really your jam, then finding people who love that component of it is probably a good idea too. That way you can focus on what you want to do and what you get energy from.
Yeah. The other thing that I tell everybody is that, architecture is a very long profession, and that is really great. You don't have to be in a hurry to do anything. No one's going to hire you until you're old, in a way, for anything very significant, and I think it's a profession that it's a constant learning, and, you don't need to be in a hurry to do anything, because in a way you need to know a lot of things and have that confidence and have that portfolio before you can tackle the really complex projects. So it's okay, I think, because there's no hurry. And it's hard for young people to hear that. But, you don't want to be a rock star, die young. Architects work old, and that's great. There's always something to learn. And by the time, if you don't make it, then you got your grandchildren.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At that point. Yeah.
So we do have one last question that we like to ask here. It's somewhat a surprise question unless you've heard other podcasts, but we like to go back to being very human. And so the question is, what's the nicest thing anyone's ever done for you? And this can be, we get all sorts of, we get from like very professional to like very personal responses. And it's just a way to bring it back to, we're people.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's got to be something that my kids did. I think the nicest thing anyone has ever done for me. So many people have done so many nice things. But I think, just it's nice. I think what's nice is that I met them all and that we worked so well together. And I think that, that book that you have referenced is really a book about life and architecture. And we tried to we have pictures of our kids in there. We tried to show what it's like, to lead a creative life and to intermesh life and work in a way. And there's something very rewarding about that. So I guess it's nice that them all still likes me.
Yeah, in the book, it really is refreshing. It's like a dialogue between you two throughout. It's almost like reading the audio of like you both going through the book and just like talking about it. It's really nicely done.
A lot of work, a lot of editing, but yeah.
Really appreciate your stories and also, being so open and transparent with us about how things have gone for WorkAC, the challenges you faced and everything else. I think it's super helpful to have more of these type of conversations because the industry does face challenges, a lot of external pressures. And I think it's the more that we talk about these things, the sort of we can lift all boats. And so really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us and appreciate our, everyone that was able to attend and those that will be listening to us on the podcast as well. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you for inviting me. Great.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.